Hi everyone, welcome to my watercolor class. My name is Barbie Mathis, and today we're going to be painting from my photos of a pink hibiscus. And what you're going to learn is how to paint the backgrounds, how to paint the detailed middles, how to paint the petals using 3 different shades of color. And this is an example of some of the different types of backgrounds we're going to do. So to get started, we're going to work on a 5x7 today. In a former video, I have cut a piece of paper into 16 pieces, and they came out to be 5.5 by 7.5. And the reason that I like to do this is for demonstrations. Did you know that most greeting cards are 5x7s? And this is an example of one that I had done for my mother a long time ago. And of course, my mother framed it. So let's get started. You get out your paper. You can work in any size that you want to. So I'll go ahead and turn this down and we'll get started. My paper is 100% cotton paper, so it's going to absorb the paint better. And once you have it taped to your board, now this is taped with masking tape that I have. It's just Duck brand masking tape. It doesn't matter what kind it is, but I like the 2-inch kind so that it will tape all the way around to the board. And this is just a gator board, or you can use foam board. You could even tape it to something like this piece right here. This is just a board that I have varnished, and so if it gets wet, it doesn't matter. And so now that I have the paper to the board, we have to talk about putting our design on here. Some people like to draw directly on their paper. Some people, most of the people in my classes are retirees, and they're just doing this for fun, and maybe they don't want to sell a lot, or maybe they just want to have something that they can give as presents or make cards from. And so if you do not like to draw, you can trace. And I suggest if you trace that you use your own photos, or that you use some copyright-free photos. And there are several services out there on the web that are wonderful. I use Pixabay sometimes. And that way you won't get in trouble if you use someone else's photograph. Or if you have a friend that doesn't mind and you have their permission, you can do that. And so this is what I do for my classes. I usually put them on I'll stack them on a Word document and print them out. And so I'll cut this in half and everybody can have one. So then you can use tracing paper if you want to. And the kind of tracing paper that I like, if you're not drawing it, or you can draw onto the tracing paper, but I love Canson brand tracing paper. And the reason why is I'm not selling this for them. I'm not affiliated with anybody yet. And so the reason I like it is because it's see-through, and you can see what you're tracing through. And so I have taped the tracing paper onto the photo, and some people like to use light boards, but the paper is so good that you can see through it. And so I just used a regular pencil, sometimes a mechanical pencil is good. And I didn't go too detailed, but just drew a few things, like some of the leaves. It's at this stage that you want to change things. Sometimes the leaves aren't in the right places. Sometimes you don't like the background, and you might want to think about the background. Is it going to be a flat background? So if not, you don't want to put any of this stuff in it. Or if you want to make a different type of a background. And here's a sample of some ways that I do backgrounds, and then we'll talk about this in just a minute. But for instance, one of the basic washes for watercolor wash is doing a flat wash. And I've masked out this area where the flower was, just so you could see that you can do just a totally flat wash. Or you can use 3 different colors and do, like alizarin crimson, phthalo green, phthalo blue, or any colors that you want to mingle in here. this has gotten a little messy because I take it to watercolor class all the time. I teach in-person classes, and hi, y'all. I know that some of y'all are with me today because we had a snow day. And so anyway, I'm glad that everybody's here. And so this is wet into wet, where you wet the paper and you just drop the colors in. And I even went back and shaped them a little bit with a Q-tip. But you can, that's how you get these mingled colors. But I'll show you on this copy several different ways that you can do it that we're painting now. Another type that I really became known for when I used to do a whole lot more flowers was that I glazed layers of color and did lifting. And I started out with a yellow, or then went with either yellow ochre or raw sienna. Then I went with, now this one is Windsor blue green shade that's over the yellows. But I used to like manganese blue, but what I found out was that once manganese blue dries, it's really hard to re-wet. And at that time, it was more convenient for me to put everything in a tray like this, and let it dry and then come back to it, because sometimes it's a lot of trouble to go back and re-squirt out the paint. Although I have been doing that more lately. But anyway, when you do this layering process of the yellows and the blues, and then I think I had a burnt sienna, then I had a combination of colors such as how I make my darks, alizarin crimson and phthalo green, or you can do burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. Well, anyway, I put that color on, and then I wet my brush and squeezed out the brush, and then you can lift up all of these. Just look at this, all of those colors. Oh, well, interesting shapes in there. And if you're doing a natural background, that kind of looks like mulch, or you could do something that looked like pine straw in the background. I have a painting that I did of red stargazer lilies, and they have this kind of background because that's what was in my yard. And so anyway, there's so many things that you can think about when doing a background. And I can show you the books that I got these out of toward the end if we have time. I will definitely send them to my class. So anyway, here's another sample of something that I had done. For instance, if you had a red poppy here, you might want to do this wet into wet background. That's a wet onto dry background again. This one was fun. Just using a lot of masking fluid with using some blue back there. And I think I put blue everywhere and then put the green on top of it before I took off the masking fluid. And look at what that does. We'll have to do that as another class here on YouTube. But this is something that I did. Of course, these are not complete yet, but this was just to show a flat dark background. And that was also with alizarin crimson and phthalo green mixed together. And the reason I like those kind of dark backgrounds is because it's not flat black. And when you turn this in different directions, you can see hints of green and hints of alizarin crimson. And so it just makes your painting look a little bit more professional, or not as flat like a flat black would be. And so it's all a matter of opinion, though, or in preference. So, and I've noticed that a lot of people use black right now because it's really popular in decorating. And so I just tend to like the more natural. So anyway, just wanted to show you those so that you can see how you can do the backgrounds. So once you've got your piece either traced or drawn, you can take it and see how I have this as a 5x7. It might be slightly bigger than that, but I don't want to put this just right in the middle. I'm going to put this over to the side just a little bit. And just so you can see what this looks like, I started one in acrylic that was toned with quinacridone background, and oops, it goes this way. And then I did the underpainting, and so now I'm working on building up the colors, which this is not complete, but this is kind of the look that I'm going for with my watercolors. But in watercolor, you have to think about, what do I want to leave light? What do I want to be dark? And so, you know, on this, I would naturally build up the light on top of this brighter pink. And on this, watercolor is so good because you can work light to dark, and you can also fix it really easily. So I'm just going to think about, I want my greens in there, and I do want a look that has, I actually like the red in here, and I was looking at HGTV magazine the other day, and this color of pink is really popular right now on people's doors. They used it on bathroom cabinets and in some places in the kitchen. And so I'm going to keep these colors in here because I kind of like decorating, actually. You never know it from my house, but I love things like this. And I want to think about, you know, I want some of this green in here. Green is a complement to red and pink. If you don't like pink, you can change this to a more peachy color. You could add, you know, other colors in here. So keep that in mind, that with the technique that I'm teaching, you can really make this your own. So I'm going to go ahead and trace this. I'm going to turn this off for just a second and then come back with it traced on, and so we can start the painting. Before I start painting, though, I do need to tell you, I use a graphite paper. It has a right and a wrong side to it. It is this brand, and it is wax-free. So Sally's, that used to be Cyril, wax-free artist graphite paper. And the reason that I like this is because it is just like a pencil. So if you trace in the wrong place, you can erase it. And you can use these sheets of paper over and over again. Sometimes I do these on different, like I've already used this one tracing for this. So you can use it on canvas, you can use it on paper. It comes in different colors, but I like the graphite. But I also like the white that they have, especially for, the white is great for acrylic paintings. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and trace this now. Now that I've finished tracing, I'm going to take this off. And at this point, you need to see if everything traced and if you can see everything, or need to add something on here. And so I think that this one is really okay. And I'm first going to see what I need to put the background in, you know, or where I need to put it. Now, I was talking about some of these layers of color. I also had some of these kind of things where I always experiment, and that's raw sienna, and this is a cadmium yellow pale, and burnt sienna. Then that was that manganese blue that I used to use, but you can use another type of blue like Winsor blue, or you could use cerulean. And then a combination of I was trying different darks to put over it before I tried lifting the colors off of it. And so if you like those types of colors, you know, I think that some of those would work in here, but no matter what, I always start with some kind of yellow in my background if I'm going to layer colors. And so I'm going to go ahead and mix up a little bit of the cadmium yellow pale and just start applying it very lightly. And I will put it everywhere that I think that yellow is behind it, such as these leaves have yellow in them. I mean, the whole background, if you layer all of these colors on top of yellow, it's going to look like a richer background. And once again, this is a practice sheet of what it's looking like to layer colors. So you can see that you can, as you do what's called glazing of the colors, you can get it really dark And so starting out with the lightest color knocks out all of the white that's behind it. And you might even put some of the yellow into the pink flower. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing that by mixing up a little of the yellow, and you can use any size of brush that you want, but I'm just putting it right where the leaves are going to be. And I'm going to pause this and bring it back when it's all complete. My paper is kind of not bleeding, but it's repelling the water a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to pause it. While this yellow is drying, I'm going to show you a book. The layering process was completely new to me. Maybe 20 years ago, I took a workshop from this person, Linda Stevens Moyer, and she wrote this book, Light Up Your Watercolors Layer by Layer. And I think that after I took her workshop, it was the first time that I ever started winning prizes in the Water Media Society, because her process really does work. And I have adjusted colors to suit myself, but she does show you ways that you can layer your colors from yellow to orange to reds to blues. Let me see if I can find that in here. She has some samples of how she works on flowers and on crystal and on everything. I mean, she's amazing. I think that she won the gold medal in the American Watercolor Society a couple of times, but she starts out with her yellows and oranges and reds and blues and greens. And this is a very tedious way to paint, and so I sometimes paint like this, but sometimes I veer off and do more wet into wet techniques. And while this is still drying a little bit, I'll show you. These were some business cards that I had done with some of my flowers on them a while back. And you can see that I like to use like the darks in the background and then a combination of wet into wet. And then maybe I'll use a Q-tip and lighten up some areas like it has light coming through. This one definitely has the layering process where I have used the layers and lifted in between and then put more paint on top and then lifted. And I'll show you how to lift as we do this. But and then here's another. All of these paintings were much larger. Now this was a 5x7. It was azaleas. But I love to put the darks in the background because it creates really high contrast. And then you do see some of the colors coming through. Maybe not this small, you can't see it coming through, but those were some roses. And in the original, it showed more of the limbs, the branches, and the rose bushes. And that I just thought it was so much fun to do the lifting of all of these after it had layers and layers of color on it. So a lot of times beginners won't take the time to do this, but in my classes, I like to show you what is possible. And so we're going to go ahead and do a little bit more on this now. Before I start painting the petals, I have to ask myself, is there something that I need to save in here? And I am going to go ahead and put a little bit of this masking fluid in the middle, just so that I don't lose my yellows for this part right here. I should know my parts of the flower, but I don't know exactly. And so I poured a little bit into this tray right here. It's, for those who haven't used it, it's a liquid fluid, an art masking fluid. What it does is you can paint it on liquid and it dries into a rubbery finish that you later remove, but while you're using it, after it dries, it repels the paint in the areas that you don't want the paint to touch. And so to use this, I've got a synthetic brush right here. I wet it and I'm going to wipe it into my soap, and that keeps the masking fluid from just completely ruining the brush. I have to wet the soap a little bit more. I work the soap through, and then I'm dipping it into the masking fluid. And let me move this out of the way. So where I have the middles right here, I'm dotting some masking fluid into it. And this brush isn't the best for this because I want it to be a little bit more perfect, but you can, if you don't want to do this, you can go back and use white gouache mixed with yellow and dot this on top. But I just think it kind of adds something to it to leave the places for it. I don't always use masking fluid though. Okay. So then we need to let that dry. I mean, if there were any areas that were really white, you could use this. Or if you wanted to paint something, for instance, light pink, and you wanted to save the light pink lines, you could put that on top of color and then put other color on top of it. But for now, I'm just going to do this right here, and I will have to go back into those and paint them at a later time. So now this needs to dry, and it needs to dry for 15 to 20 minutes or until it's tacky so that it doesn't come off of your fingers when you touch it. And so I'm going to pause this for a minute. I rinsed out my brush with soap and water, and now it's good as new. But you always need to use a synthetic brush, particularly an older brush, and you can use any size of brush that you want depending on what you need to use the masking fluid for, but just make sure it's synthetic because it will ruin a good sable brush. For the petals, I'm using different sizes of brushes. Most of my brushes are really old, but they work and have worked for many years. These are the White Sable Robert Simmons brushes. This one is a size 10, and this one, I believe, is a 6. And so those are good sizes. I also have recently gotten these Princeton Neptune brushes. This one's a size 10. This is excellent, you know, and I think I recently showed you my big quill brush that's so nice. But they are pricey, but they're worth every dime. Let's put it that way. Here's another one of the Robert Simmons brushes that I had from a long time ago. It's series 785. I don't even know if they still make them, but I think they do. And then they also have a form of Robert Simmons brushes called Simply Simmons that are a little bit cheaper, but they also work, but not quite as well. They're fine, you know, for beginners. So I'm going to take one of these, and I'll show you the colors that I'm mixing up. I always use several different colors. I was using a little bit of cadmium yellow right here. This is a cadmium, just a cadmium red, just sort of like a medium red. Then this one is permanent rose. I also have an alizarin crimson right here, but for now, the colors of the hibiscus are kind of varied. They're not bright pink. There's a little bit of yellowy orange in it. It's real subtle. And so I'm going to vary the colors back and forth just for the first layer of color. And in watercolor, in order to make really light colors, you add more water. To make darker colors, you add more pigment. So it would be less water, more pigment for all of the darker details in here that I'm pointing out with this. So I'm going to start on a petal, and I'll show you what I'm doing. It will vary back and forth. In fact, some of the colors may be kind of variegated at first, and then you let it dry really well, and then you go back in with some detail. So keep a piece of paper next to you to test the color, and I'm going to test some color right now. This is the color of the yellow and a little bit of the cadmium red mixed together that makes kind of a peachy color. I don't think you need too much of that, but I have some mixed up just in case. I can add a little bit more red in. We would never want to go this red because that's really too bright, and so you would add a lot more water to it. And I'm going to test that. That is not bad. And if you want it more pink, this is the quinacridone magenta or a permanent rose. Those two are very similar. This is actually permanent rose. And I'm going to test this over here. Now let me pull this up so you can see it a little bit. See, that's a permanent rose. So if I added water to these, see how light they can get and really subtle, sort of yummy petal looking flowers and tones. And it's best to start out too light than to go too dark, because then you have to do a lot of lifting up, although it is possible. I mean, I think, you know, if you went way too dark, see what that does? I had a dry brush. Well, it was wet, but I dried it out on my paper towel over here. And so this is what it's doing right here. So I'm going to do a couple of petals, and then I'm going to pause this and recharge my battery, and then I will finish the recording. So here we'll go ahead and do some of our petals. I can see where I left yellow off of this leaf back here. So I just take the tip of the brush and go around the edges like this, and we're kind of wet at first, and let it soak into the paper. And so that is a little bit peachy right there. I can go ahead and do the one next to it too, because it has some of those peachy tones in it, which is the red mixed with a little bit of the yellow. That is light up in here, so I'm going to pull some out. And you can just kind of, as you learn to work your brush, you can see where it's going to be too light and too dark. I'm going to just pull some of this down. And the nice thing about watercolor is, while it's still wet, you can make the most lovely subtle color changes. I'm going to pull in a little bit of color down towards the middle of the flower. And this is definitely not the final coat. This is just the beginning here of sort of shaping and forming the petals of the flower. See how the color is doing. Now this is going to dry a little bit lighter, but while this is doing this, I'm going to rinse out my brush. I patted it on my paper towel like that, so you can see there's almost nothing in my brush. This area right here is very light, so I'm going to pull out some of that right now. See how it lightened up really easily? It's all in learning how to work the brush. And before I even put the other colors in this, I'm going to pull a little bit of color out of that edge, because this is almost white across the top here, just like it is over here. So, you know, if I went ahead and put that color in right there, I could pull that out. But I'm going to let that dry kind of light there. Now, I'm going to have to wait till that dries, because if I put the yellow in back here that I forgot, it will bleed all into here. So that would be called a back run, or a cauliflower, or a bloom. And I talked about that when we talked about palmetto trees. Those on YouTube, if you want to go back and see the video called Peek Inside, I'm demonstrating to my class palmetto trees and grasses, and the grasses are done with back runs, which is you do a flat wash, then you do put another paint into it. You introduce another paint, and it just bleeds all over, and it makes the most wonderful grass. So anyway, you can use those for, to help you, but they can also be awful if you're not using the paint the right way. Okay, let me see how much I can get done, and then I have to recharge my battery. I film everything on my phone. Nothing is edited. It's just paused. And so I really appreciate your patience with all of this as I learn. I love YouTube. I mean, I learned so much on it myself, and I just want to give back and share with all of you. And so if any of you out there have not liked and subscribed to my channel, that would help me out a great deal, because one of these days in my retirement, I might need a little stream of income coming in. And the good thing about YouTube is you can keep on making money off of your videos as long as people keep watching. And for me, the advantage of it, with doing in-person classes too, is it's a great review for everybody. And now I like to give everybody a lot more attention, in my in-person classes. But if you have questions, you can drop them in the comments, and I'll try to see if I can answer your questions. I don't know everything. I'm still learning a lot myself. I think we'll always have a lot to learn. But I would love to help you in any way that I can. So, and those of you that are out there, tell me where you're from and what you like to paint. I would like to do videos that people would love to watch. And so I'm pretty good at doing flowers, landscapes. I have done people. But most of my people, I have to admit, they are not drawn, they're traced. And you have to learn how to adjust your tracing, because photographs can distort images. And I have one that I did of my daughter that is slightly distorted. At the time, she was very young, and it made her look like she was much older. So anyway, that's something to be careful about. And this is just the very first layer of painting the flower. A lot of beginners will want to stop at this point and with just a few other extra lines. But as you build the layers and what are called glazes that I mentioned before, it really adds the richness to the flowers. And let me see if I don't know if I put these back over here. Yes. I mean, this has similar colors to it. I called this one Double Decker, and it's irises that I grew one time in my backyard. And they were up against this plant that was called Henry's Garnet. And you can't really tell, but it looks like the shapes of the Henry's Garnet behind there. But anyway, the petals themselves have layers and layers of colors. And if you can learn to do this and you like doing this process, I mean, that's the key, is you have to like it. I won a really good prize on this one, and then it sold right away too. So just letting you know that these are the kinds of things that win shows if you want to do this process. This is not the complete painting. Some of these paintings are cut off a little bit for the business cards, but this one was at the Waterfront Gallery in Charleston for a while in a Water Media Society show there. And I believe it got an honorable mention. I'm not sure. Some of my things get honorable mentions and some get good prizes. And this one has gotten a first, not a best of show, but a first prize at a local art guild. And just several other types of prizes, though. These are done the same way with layers of color and backgrounds. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and pause this and charge my battery, and then I'll, after these petals are dry, I will show you how I layer more colors. Thanks. Go drink some coffee or the beverage of your choice and come back, okay? At this point, everything here is dry now, and so I've gone ahead and mixed up the green, and I'm going to start the layering process on my leaves. I tend to work all the way around, and so I'll do the leaves, and then I'll do some of the background, then I'll do some of the flowers, and back and forth. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this. I dip my brush in water so that I can spread this more easily. Sometimes it takes me a few minutes to see how wet I need the paint to be. And since this is dried completely, I needed to re-wet it. And I can gradually layer these colors, but I'm just going to go ahead and put all of the green in right now, and I'll layer it as needed. I'm using the brush strokes that, if they show, will be in the direction of the leaf. Maybe I might leave a little bit of yellow right there so this won't bleed together. If that's a problem, I can always skip around on my leaves. And that way I can be working on something while the other part is drying. And I do see there's a lot of little either creases or extra leaves or shadows in here, but I can create those a little bit later or lift some out now before they dry completely. So with the yellow underneath the green, it gives it a little bit of depth already. The way this is drying here helps too. And so I'm going to rinse out my brush a little bit and clean off my brush. And if I want to pick up some color, such as right in here, I'm just going to pull up a little bit right here, and it will look like it's a vein. I didn't realize right here goes off the page, but I can always add extra background to that. And I'll later go back and put dark right here. Left out a little bit of light. Okay, I'm going to skip over to this other side before I do these here because, like I said, I don't want them to bleed. And this brush might be a little bit small. Some people would use a bigger brush to cover more space. Sometimes I like a smaller brush just to have a little bit more control. And this is a tighter type of painting that I'm doing right here. And sometimes tighter paintings are also easier for beginners because you can get a really good result in a controlled way. And so that's what I'm doing. But always use the biggest brush that feels good in your hand, because you can cover more space at what you're doing. And so here, I'm going to put some of this here, and it may bleed into that other area, but this part's going to get dark right there. So if it bleeds into it, it's okay, because I'm adding color on top of it. I'm going to be careful to go around my flower right here so that I don't bleed into the pink. Of course, it's not going to bleed since it's dry, but I don't want to just make random marks that I'm going to have to remove. And I'll later go back and put a little bit of color in here before I add the darks on top of it. So I'll skip back over to this leaf, and I'm taking the cadmium yellow and the ultramarine blue and adding some more. It's okay if the colors are varied just slightly, because with real leaves, they're varied. Now this, I did not draw in this separate leaf right here, so I can make some of that lighter. I'll show you that as I go. Sometimes I leave out lines by accident without realizing it. I'm thinking I'm going to make some of this a bigger leaf, and then add the smaller leaf in front of it, because now that I look at it, it kind of needs it. And I can erase some of the graphite from behind it. I'm going to bleed some green into this section right here, because I can layer the colors on top of it. So I say bleed, I'm just going to paint it into here, and then carve it out by doing a negative painting, which is painting behind these leaves right in here with a darker color as I do this. So, so this will be the base for it. And this is the part that takes a little bit longer. It's just filling in the colors. So during part of this, I may continue just to fill in some of the colors, and then pause it in between so that you don't have to watch so much of it. You can just see what's happening. At this point, I've added a little bit more of the green in the background, and I'm going behind some of this with a mixture of green and also a little bit of yellow ochre, because this color in here is has a little bit of yellow ochre in it. Or if you don't have yellow ochre, you could use, raw sienna. But this will give this a more natural look because it won't be a solid color. And then I can just add a little bit of a wet into wet type of a texture in here to let it dry like that. I'll still be going over it with other colors, but I like this. I like the effect that this gives, and it will give a few little light and dark places in here. I'm going to get a slightly bigger brush, and then I'll do the same thing. I'm mixing up more of the ultramarine blue and using a little bit more of the yellow in here, and probably a little bit of the yellow ochre too. So I'll mingle colors into this background before I add the darks. And this really does have a lot of extra color here. And so if I want to, at this point, I can work wet into wet and add some more red tones in here. I'm going to put a small amount of alizarin crimson, or you could use just a red, like such as cadmium red or naphthol red. Those are more orangey reds, but I think that this will work with it. Okay, this is, I'll go back and forth with colors, but this is the brighter red right here. Can you see that? I'll put this up a little bit. This is more of the alizarin. The alizarin is a little bit more of a blue red. And let me just touch some of these colors like that. And at this point, I kind of experiment to see the way the colors react, and I may have to go over it with more colors. But I'm going to take a little bit more of this deeper green mixture right here and let it run into those colors. Because one of my favorite dark mixtures is, like I've said, the phthalo green and an alizarin crimson. Now, this is not a phthalo green. This is French ultramarine mixed with cadmium yellow, but it still gives the same effect. You get a little bit of this dark mix that varies from a forest type of a green to a magenta or plum color. So see, this adds a little exciting touch to the corner of this painting. And if I do the same thing over here, it's going to give the effect like this. It's not going to be, you know, really stark, but I can soften it a little. If it dries too muted, I can go back and add other darks in there. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that a bit right in this area, first of all, on the left-hand corner. Try not to cover it up for you. So here, I'll set this on to the side like this so you can see this is what I'm doing right here. Okay, so I'm using, first of all, I was using some of this green mixture and going in here like this. And by doing this, I'm kind of skipping all of my layered processes. I'm adding a little bit of the wet into wet process into this, so it will speed it up. And it may not turn out quite like some of my other paintings, but it will turn out fine. So some of this in here. So I'm using wet on dry. And before it dries, though, I'm going to take a mixture of, okay, so that is a little bit of yellow ochre. I know you're thinking, why are you adding yellow ochre? I added some over here in the right-hand corner, and I can stick that into some other places, but I also can make the mixture of that green and put some of that in there and let it run together. Now that dried really fast, and alizarin is a very staining color, so you do have to work fast if you're mingling the colors into a wet into wet fashion like this. I'm going to take a little bit of the ultramarine blue. Now that's really blue because I didn't mix it with the yellow, but I really like the different colors kind of blended together like this. I think that looks very natural. And like I said, we can always go back over it with more and more colors, as long as we stay within the right color families. Because you're probably wondering, why isn't that becoming mud? It's because what's under it is dry, and the colors are very specific that I'm using here, so that they're bleeding together in a way that's kind of complementary to the painting. That might be too harsh. I might just go over that just slightly. I might add in some of this red right in here, even though it's over to the edge of this photo. This photo is not as long as what I'm doing. I'm trying to get this to fit into a 5x7 shape, and I want to wet these edges so other colors will bleed into it. And here I can put some of that red on top of that green right there to mute that. And I'm taking more of the ultramarine blue again, and I'm mixing it into the yellow and putting in a few touches so they look like background leaves. So this is too specific of a color and a shape, and so while I'm doing that, I can go over this and mute it a little bit by adding some water to the top of it and let some colors bleed on top of it. Now I'm going to go back to my smaller brush because I want to have more control. I don't want to put too much water here, but if you can see some of this, that works right there. And I know you're probably wondering about the edges of the hibiscus. When we go back and add more colors on top, we will clean up the edges. We can even erase some of the graphite from underneath if we need to. And I just want to make sure that I tell you this again if I have not told you. Graphite paper is not the same thing as carbon paper, because I have so many people that don't listen to what I say, and they say, oh yeah, when I worked in an office we used carbon paper all the time, and I'm going, no, this is not the same as carbon paper, because carbon paper has wax in it, and you will ruin your painting because you'll never be able to get those black lines off from underneath anything. And sometimes it's hard enough with the graphite paper, but I found that the brand that I like is much easier to get off. So just letting you know that, okay? So I'm going into this with a darker green back here again, and then I'll mingle some more colors into the background. Here, I'm going to put a little bit of water right there and then touch it with some other colors here. So this is already starting to shape up with this kind of a background. I was just checking to see if my microphone was still on so you can hear what I'm saying. I'm still getting used to this. Okay, I'm sticking in a little bit of the yellow ochre in places and mingling that into the background, so I have some other colors going on, and then maybe I want to put some more of a red look back here. And maybe a little bit more in here. I put some blues and greens. Here, let's see if this works. I don't want this to be very specific, so I'm going to take some yellow ochre as well and put back here. And I would love to hear what y'all think about this. Feel free to comment. I try to get to all of my comments on YouTube. So, and of course, my class people, you can comment here, or you can comment, you can send me an email. So, in-person people get first preference, but I sure do appreciate all of the people out there watching me on YouTube. Okay, I'm always trying to stand back and see what I need to do. And it's uneven in the background around. So as I do the flower and work on the leaves, then I'll even up the background a little bit. I mean, I want it to be random, but I don't want it to be a completely different color here, completely different color at the bottom. I kind of like what's going on in the corners and sort of up in here. And of course, I'll soften any hard edges. So I'm going to re-wet some of this again. And also make some darker green again. And this whole thing is looking dark green. And so since I don't want it to be all the same, I'm sticking in some yellow ochre again, possibly some reds back in here, a little bit more blue. I'm going to let this sit and see what happens, and then I can always do what's called glazing and add layers of color on top of other places that are going to need the layers of color here and there. But once I get the flower done, I can see how bright that is and how I need to adjust everything in order for that to stand out, because of course, you know, the leaves are still flat. I'm going to have to add more to them in order to bring out some of the leaves. So I'm going to work on that just a little bit right in here. So I'm going to pause the video for a second and mix up some colors for my flower. I'm showing you my palette now. This is alizarin crimson. This is permanent rose. This is cadmium red. And this is a mixture. I have cadmium yellow pale and permanent rose, and it mixes up to be this kind of like the cadmium red, except you can go more orange or more pink with it. And so those are the colors that I'm going to just gradually put on my flower. Before I start painting on the flower, though, I want to show you, this is a kneaded eraser if you haven't used one before. And I like to go back, if there's some graphite on here, I soften it a little bit with every layer that I put on so that you can't really see it as much. Some people do not mind the pencil lines. I just think it helps to clean it up a slight bit because some of that might show through just a little bit. And so, can't really tell, but that lightened it up just a little bit, and I'm lightening up the edges, and they're looking really scruffy, and so I will be able to fix that. So, you know, if there's anything that like smears from the graphite, you can get that off. Okay, and there's still a little bit underneath the masking fluid there. So, okay, I'm going to start that. Start layering the colors on now. Before I do, though, I do keep my kneaded eraser in this little container because it keeps it from drying out. Just a tip, you can keep it in anything, but I can keep up with it better like this so that my cat doesn't knock it off the table. As I repaint the petals and put another layer on top, I re-wet them. And I'm going to re-wet this one right here because it helps the paint to soak in a little bit like an uneven bleed. And I'll put some in toward the middle too because I want some of that to go down into the middle. So I'll show you petal by petal, starting out with this one, and then I'll do the others, how I make some of these subtle bleeds on here. We don't have to make every single little vein, but some of the color changes are really easy to make with watercolor. And so I've re-wet this. I don't want it to be soaking wet. I can test it a little bit. So to begin with, for these colors, I'm using the cadmium yellow pale and permanent rose. So I'm making this pale reddish color, and you can start either way up here or down here, but since it's really red towards the middle, I'm just going to go ahead and go over where I put the masking fluid and let this bleed. And I've got a little bit much in my brush, so I just dabbed it on a paper towel. And I want this to be more controlled, so maybe I should let this dry just a touch more, but let's see how this does. If it's bleeding too much, you don't want to keep going in certain places, but I think I can go up here to this part of the petal, and it's drying just a little bit, and I can always wipe out my brush. Here, let's take the paper towel like this, and you can clean it up in areas if you want to. And for instance, like right in here, I'm just pulling some of this paint slightly up. Now I'll get something, you know, like a back run back in here, so I have to be careful not to put too much water in there as I blend this. Back runs are also called cauliflowers or blooms. So now I'm going to take a little bit. I didn't really wet this one. You can see that it's harder edged. But as I go, if I want that to be part of this color, I put some of it on there, but I need to re-wet this in here so that will blend in, and then I'll pull out this light area because there's a very light area right in here. Here, I'll pull this down just slightly so that maybe you can see my reference just a little bit there. And I'll go ahead and do this one. I need to wet this. I had been blotting my brush so that it doesn't have too much water. I'll blot some more up in here. And taking the cadmium yellow pale and the permanent rose once again. And this is very intense in here. So I can really go in like that if I've saved enough. And like I said, if I did not save enough of the area where the little pollen pieces are, I can go back with gouache and fix that. Now this I did not wet right there, so I need to be a little bit careful with it. And I'm going to put some blue out here too, because I want that blue to mingle in here. Putting a little bit of ultramarine blue. It's turning a little bit purple. Now this area isn't quite as dark as what's happening here, but I think it's going to be all right. I can wait just a second on this. I don't want the purple to bleed up into this whole area. But I'm going to put a slightly bit more of the pink in here. Is that still wet? Yes. Okay. It's important to keep checking because all of these things are just such subtle changes. And I even sometimes use my Winsor Newton Series 7 brush just to do little tiny veins. Even though this isn't going to be so detailed, it helps direct the paint in just a small line right here. And this is how I get my very realistic look with flowers. I also have this, I think it's a number 4. Yeah, a number 4 Robert Simmons White Sable 785 brush. I did look them up when I was taking a break, and they do still carry them, so you can find them online. There's several places around that carry them. So when I sign up for affiliate marketing, I'll share all of those things. And right here, I want this to turn like it's like a petal going rounded. And so I'm going to wet that just a little bit more right now and let some of the color bleed onto the edge. Right, just like this. See how when I touch it with the color, it bleeds into this? And you can just touch it in a few different areas. And that makes all the difference. So I may not do a whole lot more on this one. I'll see what else I can stick in here to make the edges look like they're turning. And I can always come back at the end and touch it up a little bit. I've still got a little bit of the blue mixed into the pinks to create this slightly purplish mauve color in here. There are so many little veins in here. Can you see that? I'm not going to make every one of those veins. The texture of the paper is going to accomplish some of that for me. And so it really is the control of the paint and how you let it bleed that causes that to happen. And I'm using just tiny bit of red in here now for this right here, right here. I hope that I'm not covering this up. I'm not looking at what I'm doing, what I'm filming right now, because it's above me. Something like that. And then I see how this edge has a little bit of color on it. I'm going to go back and re-wet that, just a very small amount, and then take my paint and just touch the edge so it looks like it's not a hard line, and it's going to bleed just a little bit into the paper. Okay, so when I do that, it's that every time you put on one thing, you see something else. So this part dried very light, and this part right here is darker than that. And so I'm going to go back eventually and re-wet this and put more dark colors on here. I'm going to do some of this right now and turn this off, because to tell you the truth, I don't know how big of a video I can upload with my phone. And so I want it to be able to be uploaded and not have to divide it. So I'm going to turn it off right now and finish some of these petals, and then I'll turn it back on again. I just realized I don't have the microphone on, and so what I've done here is I've started adding some of these detailed lines, and I'm going to have to go back and soften them. I could actually put more color underneath first, but I've used a Series 7 brush, and I'm using a little bit of ultramarine blue and also some alizarin crimson, and forming some of the lines. Now this is going to have to dry really well if I go back in here and put a lighter color. So I could just go ahead and put the lighter red now, and if I do that, this is going to bleed just slightly, but I can do this section and show you how much darker this needs to get. I'm putting water on right now because it's going to have to kind of bleed into this area, and I'll put that over that color too. And so now you know the reason why not everybody does this, because it is a little bit of a tedious process. It's kind of hard to teach, because a lot of people get discouraged and don't want to go to the trouble of doing this. But I think that it's well worth it when you see what the results are for the flowers. They're so luscious looking. The petals look so alive, and there's so many variations in the color like petals are. It makes them soft. And maybe this area might need a little bit of more color in it. And so I'm going to just re-wet this and just put in a little bit of this peachy color that's in this petal. And I will not put all of the veins in it. Okay, I'm reaching over and getting more of this pink. I know that this is not exact right here. Let me push this up a little bit so you can be sure to see it. That's too hard right there, so I'll come back and soften that. And if you don't have this exactly like the photo, don't worry about it, because nobody's going to be looking at your photo when you're showing your artwork, okay? So the purpose of this is just to show the technique. And I think I'm going to stick a little bit of this purple tone in here just to turn the edge of it just slightly. I don't want that much. There we go. It's just a subtle color change. And up in here, maybe a little bit of, it can get a subtle color change. And so I actually am using a little bit of the yellow ochre along with the purple mix that I made. And see, this, it almost looks like it has a sort of a brown tone to it. And so those are some of the color changes that I do. If you can see these, here I can fold this over just a little bit more so you can compare those petals. This needs to get darker. And I'll just keep adding more and more color to this until it's dark enough. And let that bleed in there. That might need to get a little bit of alizarin crimson, because this is a bluer tone right here than I'm making it. It's not bright red. So I'm going to go ahead and do some more of these petals and turn this off for a minute. This is what the flower looks like at this point. And I still, as this dries, I can still go back in and deepen some of the colors. It's just a really tedious process, but I think I'm going to call it a day for today, and then pick back up on this a little bit tomorrow. I've worked on the hibiscus some in watercolor and in acrylic, and this is at a drying point. And whenever it's dry like this, I like to take what I call a working mat. You can see it's not a perfect mat because it has spots on it, and put this on so I can see where I am at this point. Now, a lot of people would be tempted to stop at this point, but when you look at the overall values in here, they're too much the same. You have very little that's really light. You have very little that's dark. And I like to push the contrast so that there are a lot of darks that bring out the flower itself. And so I'm going to add layers of darks around the leaves. And just to review what we've done so far, we started out painting the whole background yellow. We painted it a light cadmium yellow, and you could have used a Brilliant or anything like a lemon yellow. These are the same colors that I use in my layers of glazes, starting with cadmium yellow and cadmium orange. And then this is just an experiment with seeing what alizarin and then cadmium red looks like on top of it. And then as you keep on layering, phthalo blue and ultramarine blue, and then other colors on top. This is how dark you can get it. I'm going to turn it to the side so you can see the whole thing. And so anyway, we started out with the yellow. Then I veered off. Every once in a while, I don't stick to my plan of exact colors. And so I decided that I wanted to do a little bit of wet into wet, because as you can see, the photograph right here probably has some flowers in the background and all kinds of things that I'm not sure what that is right now. I took this down in Florida, and that might be some kind of ground cover or variegated floral flower or greenery in the background. And so maybe I don't want that stark red. And so I worked a little bit wet into wet. So I wet the yellow that was behind here, and I dabbed in colors and let them bleed together. So I got those nice blossoms of color that look like background colors for this flower. And I still want to go deeper on this. And so now that I've been looking at it with a mat on, I'm going to add some more contrast. And what I've also done is I've added a few more details in the flower. Sometimes I have to put some on and then let it dry and then see what else I need. So I will go back and add final details after I do the background of this. And then, as you can see, the leaves are not complete yet, and there are some hard lines. And as I go along, I'm going to soften it. So I want to tell you a little bit about how I mix the darks for the back. If you don't want to go directly towards layering the colors like this, you can mix some colors. And I use this formula in both my acrylics and in my watercolors of mixing darks. These are my favorite dark combinations. Ultramarine blue and burnt sienna makes anywhere from burnt umber to black to Payne's gray. Phthalo green, and this is phthalo green blue shade. Somebody did ask me about that the other day. There's a phthalo green blue shade, yellow shade. I don't know if there's a red shade or not, but anyway, this is phthalo green blue shade. This is an older chart, and it was carmine, but I often use alizarin now, which is very similar to carmine, and especially for watercolors. And if you put like a dot of the red into the green, it makes sort of a forest green color, or almost teal. Then black, then you can make a plum. I mean, there's all kinds of variations of these colors that you can make, but layered on top of these other colors, they will make it appear shadowed or like a background area. And of course, there's other ways that you can mix darks. You can mix all of the colors, like the primaries, ultramarine blue, alizarin, or a bright yellow like cadmium to make a brown. Depending on the amount of each one, you can get that more towards black or brown or more of an orangey red. You can use, put yellow and green into it too to make a black. So there's many ways to make black, and you say to yourself, well, why don't you just use black? Well, in nature, it's very seldom that you see solid black, unless you're looking at a wrought iron gate or something that's next to it that is man-made. And so depending on the way the light hits something, you're going to see a blue black or a green black or a red black. And you can tell that when you're wearing your, certain clothes with black. Sometimes your black shirt doesn't match your black pants or your black jacket. They're slightly off because there's variations of black. So I had a judge tell me in a show one time, when I used to enter shows a long time ago, that one of the reasons she picked one of my paintings was because of the way that I did black. And let me see if I have that painting. Oops, I'll have to show you in a few minutes. This is a business card that has the painting. Let me see if I can see it here it is in my screen. I'll hold it up close. This was a painting that I had done of my daughter a long time ago, and she was wearing a black tam and a dress and gloves against this leather. And you can't so much tell from this business card, since this isn't the original, and I don't own the original anymore. But the way that this light was hitting this, they showed up slightly different colors, and the judge thought that this was done well because of the way that that I had done the black. And so anyway, just telling you that can make a difference. So let me just go ahead and get started. And before I put paint on the watercolor, I do want to say, since I do teach acrylic and watercolor, not always in the same class, but sometimes I do. In acrylic, I am working dark to light. And so when I'm putting my highlights on, usually it's a brighter pink. Or I have done an underpainting that was on, quinacridone red with the Payne's gray, and then I put colors on top of it. And so it's easier to put your lights on. In watercolor, I like to go light to dark, and so I'm going to put my darks on, and then I'll have to clean up the edges a little bit. So I'm going to turn this off for just a minute while I do some of that, and then I'll show you. I've got all of my colors mixed up on my palette, but they aren't mixed as darks yet. And so I've taken a lot of inexpensive brushes here so that I wouldn't mess them up, and I can show you what some of the colors look like together. So this is the burnt sienna. This is ultramarine blue. Then I have phthalo blue green shade, phthalo green, and both of these are alizarin because I want to show you what they do. I'm thinking that I'm probably going to do a lot of my darks with the phthalo and alizarin mix. And so I can dip my brush in the water, and depending on how much water you make, it's a lighter color. And if you use the paint fairly dry, it's darker. So you can see a little bit right there. So that's more, this would be more towards a lighter shade in here. And then if I decide to just put a dot of it in this area, let me just rinse out my brush a little bit. That's more green, but then it can be like a dark green here. So I might vary back and forth with that. Also, one of my favorite purples is actually using the phthalo blue green shade with the alizarin. And also one of my favorite navy blues is using a little bit of alizarin in it. So if I use just a little tiny bit of alizarin in this, see, it makes this rich dark blue color. I think that's really, really pretty. But also, if you put more red into it, let me just rinse off my brush. Well, I can just go ahead and take some like this. You can see that this is becoming really purple. And so that is a really good color in nature. And the fewer colors that you use, the more harmonious that your painting is going to be, because you're going to have some of the same colors everywhere. And so I don't like to have a separate color for every single thing. I mean, I do have purple on my palette right here, and it can be used in there, but using the purple that's with some of the other colors that I'm already using, that will work really well. Also, if I decide to make a different type of black, here is alizarin crimson, I mean not alizarin, burnt sienna with a little bit of ultramarine blue. Look, it makes a burnt umber if I need that burnt umber in there. I'm going to take a little bit more blue right here, down at the bottom. Got a lot of brushes going on here. But see, it becomes dark like a Payne's gray. So it just all depends on what colors that you want to have. So now I have some colors mixed up, and I'm going to cut this off again, and let's see, I might just start it right here so that you can see this going on, and then I'll turn it off so you won't have to watch the whole painting on there. This is some of the phthalo green and alizarin crimson put into the background, and I don't know if I want it to be solid, so if it's looking too solid when I put this on here, and see, you can see what I'm trying to do right there. I'll put the corner of the photo right next to it. Look at how that actually starts looking like that background when you put that dark color on top. I think watercolor is kind of like magic sometimes. I think that looks really pretty. And I don't know that I want this really hard edge, since this photograph is not, it doesn't show a hard edge right in here. So what you can do is just take a little bit of water, and it's okay if this bleeds a little bit, because here we can soften that up a bit. That might be too green, but see, it softened the edge compared to this one right here. And here, let's bring this in. Maybe I might soften some of these edges. Now this, you know, when you start putting things on here, you can see where there's little touches that are repelling the paint. But you can also see that this leaf is a lot lighter than this one right here. So you don't always have to make it exact. You can make some of your leaves lighter and darker. I tried to put a shadow ahead of time on there, but it needs to have another coat of something on top of it, or a layer of paint, because it's not working. It looks like there's a piece cut out and there's a piece cut out, and I don't want it to look like that. And so here I'm going to come, whoops, that's too green. So before it gets too green, I'm going to put some of this dark color around here. And did you know, if anybody that does acrylics is watching this, if you're using fluid acrylics that are kind of watered down, you can do this exact same technique on paper and or illustration board. You could even do it on canvas, but it I think if you had a really good gessoed surface, you know, it would accept the paint really well. So I'm going to put some of this around here, and I'll work on the rest of it. I might show you how I handle this leaf right here too, so that, now see how that's coming out? I think that this is a good example of how the layering process works. This looks a little bit more yellowy, and so I might actually take a slight bit of yellow ochre in with this green mixture that I have right here, and I'm going to brush some of that over it. Now, if I touch the edge too close, it's going to bloom again, but I'm going to go over the whole entire thing like that, and it's going to bring it together. And there's a separate leaf right here. So if I want to, I can just do that separately. I don't want it to turn out too green. Like phthalo green can quickly get to be too green, but it works so well with the alizarin, so I would never take it off of my palette. I have heard other people that I've taken workshops from before say that it was such an obnoxious color. I think every color has its own purpose, and phthalo green is one of them. That it's very staining, but it's just, it makes such beautiful rich darks that I would never take it off of my palette. And so I'm going to work around this, and then you can see how it turns out. As you can see, I've layered some of the colors on this side to create some of the darks. They'll still have to be touched up, and I just want to show you the contrast before I do the other side. So now you can see right in here how light it is compared to what the photograph looks like and what the rest of it looks like. So I'm going to work my way around and then work more on the leaves and the flower. At this point, I'm checking the background again with my mat, and I've gotten it pretty dark, but at this point I need to go in and fix my leaves and probably soften some of the edges so that it blends into the background. And then if I need to touch up the background some more, I can do that. To review again how I've painted the greens on my leaves, remember I used the double primary palette, so I used one of the two blues and one of the two yellows. And so I've decided, that for these leaves, I began them using the ultramarine blue and the brighter yellow because I thought that the leaves in the photograph were similar to those colors. And remember, once again, if they aren't the exact colors, you can always add something like burnt sienna or something opposite on the color wheel than green. And the complementary color of green is red. And so anything in that red family, like a light red, orangey red, burnt sienna, or even alizarin crimson, will calm down colors. And you can use some of those in the shadows. And so this is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to layer on some more colors on the leaves. Here is my cadmium yellow pale and my ultramarine blue, and I'll just add a little bit of water, and if I put just a tiny bit of the blue into here, I'll have my dark green shade into the yellow. Maybe if I just put a very small amount of more yellow, I'll have that lighter green shade. And in some areas on the leaves, it does use a duller yellow. And so if I want to do that, I can use a little bit of this yellow ochre. And so I'll have that on my palette in case I need to mix it in here and there. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started on the leaves. And I usually just wet the whole leaf with a color such as I want to do this a little bit darker, although I kind of like the light that's showing on this leaf, but it can still go a little darker. And so let's see how this works. I don't always know what it's going to be like until I do it. So I'm using a lot of water in it since I'm not sure of the shade yet. Since I had left places for it to be light right here before, I'm just deepening it a little bit like this. And I'll even come over with a slightly darker green in this shade, in this shady area on the leaf. And I know that the edge is not that light and cut out right there. I'm going to add a little tiny bit of the yellow ochre in this area to dull this down just a little bit. And I'll bring it into this other leaf too, in this area. And while this is still wet, I'll just touch a few places here with a slightly darker color. And you can see here that there's a few little dark areas in the leaf, and so I'll just touch that while that's wet. This isn't exactly like the leaf in the photo, but that's okay. Nobody will be looking at the photo when they are looking at my picture, so I don't want it to look too hard or cut out, so I can go back and soften this. And you can go back and lift out a little bit. Maybe I'll put some of the dark in here. I'm still using my really cheapy brush right here. Sometimes I get pretty good results with these that are out of a pack. The most important thing is that don't ever skip on your paper, though. Your paper needs to be 100% cotton in order to have, if you like this layering technique, that's what it needs to be. If you have a very loose style, you may not need it as much, but I just highly recommend, even when you practice, to practice with the best paper that you can possibly afford, which is the 100% cotton. And oh, I see now that this is a separate leaf. I wasn't aware of that before, but I'll do like that. You can always change your leaves a little bit if you need to. I stuck another leaf back here, but I'm gonna that's not in here, but I think that I'll just darken it a little bit, lighten it toward the edge. And I can always go back and get some of my better brushes if I need to lift out. Some of the Winsor & Newton brushes I like a lot. I like synthetic brushes for lifting because they're a little bit stiffer. The sable brushes are not great for that. But I can only tell you what to do for my style. Some people don't do a lot of lifting, and so and the paper that I use is great for lifting too. It's Fabriano, and this particular one is 140 pound. But if you're going to do a large painting with a lot of lifting, I really highly recommend the 300 pound, even though it's more expensive. These days I'm focusing on leveling up paintings, and I've had some people in my classes for a while, and we just need to get past doing some beginner paintings and making them a little bit, you know, like I said, just level it up a little bit. If you decide you want to be in shows or anything like that, you might want to start learning something new and doing a slightly harder technique. But like I said, you're going to see all kinds of work. And so there's no right or wrong work. It's just what you enjoy. And I really like having a realistic look. And so later I'll go back and darken this a little bit more, but I'm just building up the layers on this. And I'm going to keep on working on this and shut this off right now. Before I do final touches on the green, because I've had to put another layer of color on the leaves, I'm going to go back in and put one more layer of color on the petals. because I think it will make it look richer. It still looks a little bit flat in some areas, and if I vary the color just slightly in some areas, such as this, and then make the middle more intense and sharpen up the details a little bit, then I can put the yellow on this area right here. And I don't have much left to do on this, so I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. This is the color that I mixed up to put all over the petals again as one more layer. It is a little bit of alizarin crimson, and I thought that my cadmium yellow might be a little bit too bright, so I'm using Aurelian. If you have that on your palette, it might work better because it's more transparent. So I'm playing with this on my scrap piece of paper, and this is what it looks like. Of course, I'm going to have to add more water in some areas and then take some of this off. But I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I think it's going to pull these petals together a little bit and then add in a few more touches of color. So I just dipped my brush in water, and I don't want to lose my light areas, so I'm going to be very careful how I go over this and then pull up some paint while I'm doing this. And then I want to bring a little bit over in this area. It's going to dry a little lighter, so I think this is going to help, and then I'll touch up the edges. That looks really dark right now, but I can get this lightened back up again. I might even put just a touch of blue in here just to make some of the creases. I know you're asking what blue. If you have ultramarine blue, that would be good. I'm lifting up a few little areas of light, maybe just a touch of it. Maybe just a little tiny bit in here. Now I'm going to pull that back up again. And I have a flat brush that I like to use. Let me see. Since I haven't been doing this all in one sitting, some of my things are different places. And so I'm going to pause this for just a minute. I've just put more color on the petals, and I'm going to pull up the masking fluid right here and then do more final details, but I'm going to have to pause it again in just a minute. See how stark white that is, you know, once you use the masking fluid and pull it back up again. And so it does leave places white. So sometimes it's good just to paint the color ahead of time and then put the masking fluid over it to save it. And then, but I'm going to be going back and painting that. So I'm going to pause for now, and I'll come back again. The painting is now dry, and where I had taken off the masking fluid, I'm going to add the pollen area right around here. And I'm looking at the leaves. I'm not really happy with the shapes of the leaves, but looking at it under this mat, I see that I have not darkened it or defined some of the leaves. So I'm going to go back and define the leaves, add a few more darks where they're needed, and then on the flower itself, there are some areas that I want to put more color in the middle, define a few more of the shapes a little bit. The edges of the petals are a little bit flat, and what I'll do is I'll wet the petal and add some of the darker areas in here. Is these subtle color changes on the very edges that will make all of the difference. And I started doing some of that there, but it's just not dark enough. And some of this where the petal turns, I need to deepen that color. And you can just see a few places where if you push the value just a little bit more, it's going to be better. But I'm not going to work on this for very long because I really do want to get this done. And I had this person that taught the painter's business to me a few years ago, and she's since passed. Her name is Mary Gilgerson, and she used to say, sometimes done is better than perfect. And so I'm going to say, after I do those few final touches, that it's going to be done, and I'm going to get this out to my class so that they can see the video, and it will be here on YouTube as a reference for everyone. And so I'll be back in a few minutes when this is done. I put the final touches on this now and sign my name with white gouache. I'll show you some of the things that I've done. I put some details in the leaves and reshaped them. And as this is drying, I do see more things that I need to do. But as I said before, I'm gonna call this done because done is better than perfect, and get this uploaded. But you can see a few little changes that I made around the petals and the leaves. And so I thank you so much for watching. And if you have any questions about how this is done, drop them in the comments and I'm glad to answer. Thank you.